Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Mr. Ritz, for standing for this nomination and for being here today. Now, it's my understanding that you were subject to an ethics investigation by OPR. Is that right?
Never in my career.
Never. But you're aware of this situation in United States versus Von Rico Weber, where you were accused of making these material representations to a defendant's attorney in order to elicit a guilty plea.
I have some recollection of that, Senator, but I was not subject to any sort of formal complaint or investigation.
Okay. Well, it's my understanding that in this circumstance, this would have resulted in the defendant serving a 10-year prison sentence, and the accusation is that you led the defendant to believe that a low sentence, a much lower sentence, would be in order, or perhaps even probation. I just want to read to you the letter, the email that we received from the concerned defense attorney, shining light on the incident. The person writing this email is recounting a conversation with the defense attorney in which you allegedly misled the defense attorney and the defendant. After the defense attorney explains it, here's how he explains it. At this point, I stopped the conversation and said, "Was the AUSA Kevin Ritz?" The answer was yes. It is unfortunate that this is not the first, second, third, or whatever occasion that this sort of thing has occurred, but everyone should be aware of this unfortunate pattern of behavior. You should be aware, your clients should be aware, and you should proceed with extreme caution. It is a sad commentary. This is a concerning allegation, of course. Now, I assume that you would agree, certainly, that misleading a criminal defense counsel as to the nature of the charges against the defendant and the likely sentence that might result from a guilty plea that would violate a federal prosecutor's ethical responsibilities.
Yes, and I did not do that in that case, Senator.
Now, my understanding is that a complaint was made against you with the Department of Justice Office of Professional Responsibility and that an investigation ensued. At what point did you become aware of that investigation?
Again, Senator, to my knowledge, there was never an OPR investigation or a complaint for that matter.
Okay, so you're not aware of anything like that?
That's correct.
Does the information you just heard, the accusation, does that reflect your pattern of behavior as a prosecutor?
Absolutely not. And I recall this, and I recall that the person who had sent that email communication certainly had not communicated with me. I'm not actually sure we had ever had cases together in the first place. In any event, I took action, and I believe I communicated with everyone who received that, because in our federal district, it's really important for AUSAs and defense attorneys to be able to trust each other, and sure. I took my reputation very seriously.
Okay, but you would agree that if you had done those things, if that had resulted in a complaint to OPR and you didn't disclose it, either of those things would be a problem?
If I had acted unethically, absolutely, but I did not.
Now, as you know, one of the most important decisions a U.S. attorney can make is the decision about whom to hire as a first assistant U.S. attorney. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
It's a pretty important thing. It's why I find it disturbing that you chose to hire Ms. Reagan Taylor Fondren to serve as your first assistant, despite the 2 disciplinary investigations that she was under for serious accusations relating to ethics violations. As a former federal prosecutor myself, I know that the fairness of the justice system depends a lot on, among other things, how prosecutors handle things like exculpatory evidence. And withholding exculpatory evidence from defense is a big problem. Ever since Brady versus Maryland was decided in 1963, every prosecutor knows that there is an obligation to disclose these things. Now, when you chose Ms. Taylor Fondren to be your first assistant, were you aware of the 2 ongoing investigations of her alleged prosecutorial misconduct related to failure to disclose exculpatory evidence?
I may have been aware of ongoing proceedings. My recollection, Senator, they were still proceeding, and I honestly can't remember if they still are today.
So they were pending at the time you chose her. Were you not concerned about that?
Senator, I am not sure I knew the particulars of the situation.
In fact, she began your service as a first assistant before her court-ordered suspension from legal practice was enforced. Is that right?
I believe that's correct, Senator. I'm not actually entirely sure.
Now, a man served 4 additional years in prison because of the misconduct of your first assistant. Now, thankfully, the Court of Appeals corrected her error, but not for the full 4 years. And so, was it in spite of or because of Ms. Taylor-Fongren's willingness to violate the defendant's constitutional rights that you chose her to be your first assistant?
Senator, as I said before, I believe that Ms. Fondren and all of our AUSAs are doing an excellent job keeping people safe in West Tennessee. These allegations and this incident occurred, I want to make clear, before Ms. Fondren was part of our office several years ago.
But you were aware of the accusations?
I was aware in a very vague sense.
Thank you, Senator Lee. At this point, I'd like to put in the record a letter from Van Turner. Are you familiar with him?